The morning began with a message, short, almost careless, yet enough to change the rhythm of my day. Free today. Need to go somewhere for some work. Come. It was from Rahil that I hadn't seen him much lately. Life had pulled us into different directions, my work, his travels, the unspoken silence that grows when people stop saying what matters. Still, when I saw his name, I didn't hesitate. I typed back, sure, where to? We met an hour later near the market, the air still carrying the weight of dawn. Rahil leaned against his bike, casual as ever, a faint smile curving his lips. He hadn't changed much, same confident stillness, same eyes that always looked like they knew something I didn't. As we set off, the city thinned behind us, buildings dissolving into fields and empty roads. Wind rushed past, tugging at my shirt, and for a while, we didn't speak. It wasn't uncomfortable silence, it was familiar, the kind that fills itself with shared memories. That he talked first, his voice low over the engine's hum. Remember the last time we went this way? You were the one terrified of getting lost. I smiled. And you pretended you had a map. I did, he said, laughing, just didn't know how to read it. The laughter faded easily, replaced by quiet again. Somewhere between the fields, I realized I was watching him more than the road, the way the light brushed his face, the way he seemed at ease in moments I couldn't. There was something grounding about his presence, something I hadn't felt in a while. After about an hour, he slowed down and stopped by a narrow stretch of road that curved into emptiness. There was no sound except wind and the distant hum of crickets. A half-broken signboard leaned nearby, half swallowed by grass. Let's rest for a bit, Rahil said, switching off the engine. We've been riding long enough. I nodded, stretching my legs as he walked ahead, scanning the horizon. The land stretched out endlessly, dry, sunlit, and silent. It felt like the world had forgotten this place. That we sat on a low stone wall, a few feet apart. The quiet pressed in, heavy but not unpleasant. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then Rahil spoke, voice softer now. You ever feel like you're just drifting? The question caught me off guard. Drifting? Yeah, he said, picking up a stone and tossing it idly. Like you're moving all the time, doing things, meeting people, but none of it feels real. Like you're watching yourself live instead of living. I didn't answer right away. Maybe because I understood exactly what he meant. The endless loop of work, responsibility, and conversations that filled days but never hearts. Yeah, I said finally. All the time. He looked at me then, not the casual glance of a friend, but something deeper. The kind of look that searches for truth without asking permission. Then why don't you ever stop? I wanted to tell him I couldn't. That stopping meant facing too much, the dull ache of a relationship that had lost its warmth, the quiet spaces at home where words used to live. But I didn't. I just looked away, pretending to notice the road. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cried out and was swallowed by silence. Rahil leaned back, eyes still on me, thoughtful. You've changed, he said. You used to talk about everything. Maybe I ran out of things to say. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. No. You just started saying less of what you feel. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. I wanted to argue, to deflect, but instead, I laughed softly, a hollow sound that fooled neither of us. For a while, we said nothing more. The afternoon sun lowered a little, casting long shadows over the road. I could feel the quiet pull between us, not spoken, not even deliberate, but there. In that stillness, I realized how much I'd missed him, not his jokes, not our memories, but the way he could see through me without asking. When I finally turned to look at him again, Rahil was already watching me. Our eyes met, and the world seemed to pause, the air, the heat, even time itself. That I looked away first. The sound of his quiet exhale was almost a whisper. Strange how peaceful it feels here, he said. Yeah, I murmured, though what I felt wasn't peace at all. That I didn't know it then, but that silence, the one that lingered between us, heavy with things unsaid, was the beginning of something that would not let me return the same. The sun had climbed higher by the time we spoke again. A faint shimmer of heat rose from the road, and the air felt heavier than before. I could hear the slow ticking of the bike engine cooling, a steady rhythm beneath the quiet. Rahil leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the distance. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked suddenly. "Leaving what?" "Everything," he said simply. "The city, the noise, the pretending." His words lingered in the air. I looked at him, but he didn't look back. There was something restless in his voice, something that made my throat tighten. "I've thought about it," I admitted. "But there's always something holding me back. Someone, maybe. Someone who doesn't see you," he said, still staring ahead. It wasn't a question, but it landed like one that I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was content, that I wasn't missing anything. But the lie sat heavy on my tongue. Instead, I picked up a small pebble and rolled it between my fingers. "You think running away makes things better?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "No. But sometimes staying breaks you quietly." His words hit too close. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable this time. It was full of everything neither of us dared to name: fear, longing, maybe even recognition. Rahil finally turned toward me. "You've been quiet all day." "I didn't think I was." "You are. You're somewhere else even when you're here." He wasn't wrong. My mind had been wandering, not to work or home, but to this strange stillness between us. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way his presence made the air feel different, alive. He shifted slightly closer, just enough for me to notice. "Ian," he said quietly, "what are you thinking right now?" I met his gaze, unsure whether to answer. His eyes held something steady, not expectation, not curiosity, but understanding. And that was somehow more dangerous. "I don't know," I said finally. "Maybe I'm just tired of pretending that I don't miss things I shouldn't." He studied me for a moment, the faintest trace of a smile crossing his face, not of amusement, but of recognition. "That's the most honest thing you've said all day." I looked away, embarrassed, though I wasn't sure why. The sky was a pale, endless blue, stretching above us like a secret too wide to hold. He spoke again, softer this time. "You know, people think connection is about words. But sometimes it's just about being seen. And you, Ian," he paused, "you've been invisible for a long time." The sentence caught in my chest. I wanted to respond, to brush it off with something light, but my voice wouldn't come. He wasn't accusing me, he was describing something I hadn't had the courage to admit. That I could feel my heartbeat, steady and loud, echoing in my ears. Every breath felt too loud in the stillness. I told myself to move, to say something, to break the moment, but I didn't. Rahil's hand brushed against mine. A simple, uncalculated motion. Yet it felt like the world narrowed to that single touch. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. It wasn't a moment of impulse. It was a quiet acknowledgement, of shared loneliness, of unspoken affection, of the need to feel known even briefly. The sound of the wind seemed to fade. The sun dimmed behind a thin layer of cloud, softening everything around us. Rahil looked at me again, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to explain anything," he said. "Not to me." For a long time, we sat there, the space between us no longer empty but full of something fragile and alive. There were no grand confessions, no promises. Just understanding, and the quiet realization that a line had been crossed without either of us meaning to step over it. When Rahil finally stood, he dusted off his jeans and smiled faintly. "We should head back before it gets dark." I nodded, my voice caught somewhere between relief and regret. The air around us felt different now, heavier, charged, irreversible. As we started the engine and the bike roared back to life, I glanced at him once more. He didn't speak, but his silence said enough. I turned my gaze to the road ahead, the horizon blurring in the heat. Something had shifted, quietly, undeniably, and though the world looked the same, I knew nothing between us would ever be again. The road home was quieter than before. The sound of the bike filled the air, but neither of us spoke. The wind pressed against my face, cool and sharp, carrying the scent of dust and dry grass. It felt as though the silence between us had a weight now, not heavy with guilt, but with awareness. Rahil kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the handlebars. From behind him, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the kind that comes when someone is trying too hard to seem at ease. I wanted to say something, to laugh, to ask where we were heading next, but every word felt unnecessary. The world had shifted in ways that didn't need language. By the time we reached the edge of the city, the sun had begun to sink. The light softened into amber, spilling over rooftops and trees like something fading too soon. We stopped at a traffic light, surrounded by noise again, cars, people, fragments of conversation. Yet it all sounded distant, as if we'd stepped out of one reality into another. When Rahil finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "You don't have to think about it too much." I glanced at him. "About what?" He didn't look back. "About today." But how could I not? Every moment replayed in fragments, the stillness of that deserted place, the way his eyes had met mine, the quiet understanding that had passed without a word. It wasn't just what had happened, it was what it had awakened. We reached my street, and he slowed to a stop. I hesitated before getting off the bike. "You're not coming in." He shook his head. "Not today." Something in his tone told me he needed distance, not rejection, but protection. From what, I wasn't sure. Maybe from himself. Maybe from me. "Rahil," I began, but he interrupted softly. "It's fine, Ian." "Really?" He smiled then, small, tired, sincere, and for a moment, I thought I saw something break behind his calm. Then he revved the engine and was gone, his silhouette dissolving into the fading light. That I stood there until the sound of the bike disappeared completely. Inside, everything was the same, the faint hum of the fan, the framed photographs on the wall, the life I was supposed to recognize. Yet nothing felt familiar. I poured myself a glass of water, but the taste was different. Even the quiet seemed foreign, like it belonged to someone else's home. That I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They trembled faintly, not from fear, but from the memory of closeness, the kind that doesn't fade when distance begins. It would have been easier if I could call it a mistake. But it didn't feel like one. It felt like something that had always been waiting to happen, only today it had found the courage to arrive. Over the next few days, Rahil and I didn't speak. There were messages typed but never sent, calls almost made and then cancelled. The silence between us grew again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full, of what we couldn't say, of what we both now carried quietly. At work, I found myself distracted, hearing echoes of his laughter, the softness of his tone when he said my name. At home, I looked at the person beside me and wondered when affection had become routine, when conversation had become duty. One night, unable to sleep, I went out to the balcony. The city was still, only a few lights blinking in the distance. I thought of that deserted road, the warmth of the sun, the weight of that silence. And I realized it wasn't about desire or rebellion. It was about being seen, fully, without explanation. Rahil had seen me in a way no one else had in years. And that frightened me more than anything else. That a part of me wanted to call him, to ask if he felt the same quiet ache. But another part knew that some connections aren't meant to be continued, only remembered. When dawn crept over the city, I finally understood, what happened that day wasn't a beginning or an ending. It was a pause, a brief moment when two people stopped running from themselves long enough to meet in the stillness. As light spilled across the balcony, I whispered his name once, not to call him back, but to let it go. Some truths aren't meant to be confessed. They're meant to live silently, between memory and heart, where no one can judge them but time itself.